Hi there everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Bob, you might also know me as Paler. Starting off this channel here today, this is going to be the first video going up for a new channel that is going to be focused on gaming nutrition, or living a healthy lifestyle as a video gamer. I think this is something that, well, hopefully there's some people out there that are interested in seeing this. I've already put up another video on my gaming channel, which I'll link to in the description down below, which goes into some of the basic stuff. But today, in this short video, I want to make a rundown of what it is I intend to do in this channel, with some content coming out very quick here over the next few days in order to set a background, get a basic bit of knowledge out there, and then I'm going to document over the course of probably about the next year my process through a combination of intermittent fasting and a ketogenic diet. So I'm 35 years old, and sitting here right now in front of you, I am about 289 pounds, 288 pounds, down from where I was at of 298 a week ago. Now, this is less than I was 5.5, 6 years ago. Around, we'll say 5 years ago, I stepped on the scale and I saw 348, give or take. Now, had I stepped on the scale at a different point in the day, probably would have been over 350. At which point I really got into exercising and dieting. So for about 2 years, I started off initially with a 2,200 calorie diet, which then I moved down to a 2,100 and 1,900 calorie diet. But I started off with that. I also put in cardiovascular exercise. So started off one day on, one day off, alternated every other day. As things got better, as I lost some weight, as my endurance built up, I was 2 days on, 1 day off, then 3 days on, 1 day off. So depending on the week, I was working out either 5 or 6 times in a given week. I did that number right. Yes. Yeah. It would rotate, but generally speaking, somewhere around 12 to 15 hours. The workouts were generally 90 minutes to 2 hours. I would adjust them based on my calorie intake. So for example, if I was at that point at a 2,100 calorie diet, but I knew, like, I'd been traveling for work, maybe I had a work lunch, which was kind of high in calories. And I knew when I'd look at my dinner, I'm like, all right, I'm going to be 2,400 calories. Well, I would intentionally then work out an extra 30 minutes, 45 minutes, maybe even an hour, in order to compensate for that. Or if, say, it was Friday and I knew I wanted to have a beer or two that night, I would also go ahead and do this. But I was generally, throughout a 2.5 year window, almost every single day functioning on a calorie deficit of 300 to 500, maybe even 800 calories. And at first, this did a really good job. I quickly went from that 348 down to somewhere around 310, then down to 290, and I actually eventually got down to 260, right around the 260 mark, where I stalled out. I don't know what happened there, I really don't, but everything was staying the same. I was still doing the workouts, I was still on the calorie restrictions, and I hit that 260, 261. And whereas before I was pretty consistently losing 1, maybe 2 pounds a week, it just stopped. It was no pounds a week. And this went on for about 6 months. I started really pushing it. I went up to, I didn't want to go much over 2 hours of exercise, simply because that eats up a lot of free time. When you're exercising 6 days a week for 2+ hours a day, it just didn't give me much free time. So I added in bicycling. I felt I could get more cardio in through bicycling, so I started bicycling 4 hours or 4 times a week, for 15 to 18 miles, give or take. On Saturdays or Sundays, I might go down to the local bike trail here, which is 30 some miles, and I wouldn't do the full thing, but figure 25 miles on a Saturday or a Sunday on the bike. Was still putting it in, and then even further restricted my calories down to 1,800 calories a day. So at that point, I would have been, I'm 6 feet tall. I was weighing in about 260. So my base metabolic calorie rate should have been somewhere around 2,400, something in there. Maybe 2,250, 2,300. And I was trying to get away on 1,700 calories a day. And that deficit, when you add in especially the exercise on top of it, I should have been burning through weight, you would have imagined. But for a year, 2 years, basically, nothing happened. I spoke with my doctor, I spoke with a dietitian, and they talked about, well, cut more calories, get more exercise, that type of thing. They did blood work. Everything was fine. In fact, my liver enzymes were looking better than they were before. Overall, I was in almost what you would call a in-shape fat person. That would almost be what you're doing. How many fat people weighing 260 pounds, 270 pounds can ride 25 miles on a bike without stopping? I was pretty good shape for a fat person. For an obese person, I was in pretty damn good shape. And that, like I said, that went on for about 2 years. After 2 years, I ran out of willpower. It had just been too much. At that point, it had been basically 4.5 years of exercising. And I was mentally and physically exhausted. So I fell off the horse, at which point I bloomed back up to what you see me at basically here now, basically back up to 290 pounds, 298, somewhere right around there, was last Friday. So, starting off here now, I am energized again. I'm back, I'm ready to go, ready to start actually really getting back at it. But I've come to the conclusion that the process I was using before, the standard process of following the 2,000 calorie a diet day, the standard food pyramid type things, add in exercise, build lean muscle, all this, it's not working for me. It hasn't worked for me, at least not at this current point where I'm at. So I've done some research, and that is going to bring me up to what I mentioned earlier, a combination of ketogenics, intermittent fasting going forward. Now, there's some real good science behind this. There is some real good science behind this, but there's also naysayers around it. And there's arguments on both sides that I've been able to come across. But the essential way it breaks down is this. When you eat anything with either sugar or carbohydrates in it, as soon as it enters your stomach sends a little bit of a message to your pancreas, which creates a little bit of insulin. The more sugar you have or the more carbohydrates you have, because carbohydrates, in order to digest them, get converted into simple sugars, the more insulin gets produced. When your body produces insulin, it stops producing something called HGH, literally human growth hormone. The thing that a lot of baseball players, football players get into trouble with, your body actually produces it on its own, but it only does it after an extended window with no insulin production. For most people, they get maybe 2 or 3 hours of HGH production every night, right before they get up in the morning, have their first breakfast, depending on how late they ate the previous day. Tied in with this HGH production, though, is also the production of ketones, which are used to break down fat. Now, the average person, if you provide enough carbohydrates or sugars in your body for you to function, say, 40 to 60%, it's different for everybody depending on their genetics, depending on their dietary habits, but say 40 to 60%, as long as that amount of carbs are going in your system, your body is going to try and only run on carbohydrates. It's only going to run on those simple sugars via the production of insulin. In order to actually get your body to consume fat, to burn fat, you need to actually remove those carbohydrates, at which point it then goes into a process of breaking down the fat and using the fat as energy rather than the sugar, which produces which produces ketones. The ketones are what are actually used by the cell in place of sugar. I think I got that right. Only 2 weeks into this, we'll correct it as we go along, but the ketones are evidence that the fat in your system is being broken down. Now, that fat could either be food you ingest or it could be body fat. It doesn't really care. It will break down the food you ingest first. Things in the intestines, in the stomach, are easier for the ketones to get to and access, but if you don't have that in your system, it will break down the fat within your body. What this means, so for someone that is looking to lose 5 to 15 pounds. During the given day when they eat, if they stop eating, say by 8 p.m., they don't consume any carbs after that, somewhere around 2, 3 in the morning, their body is going to be out of sugar, the insulin's going to be gone, and your body will produce a little bit of ketones, or break down a little bit of fat in order for energy until you get through to breakfast. Generally speaking, this is what's going to happen for a relatively in-shape person. And so any additional calories that you ate the previous day that were maybe converted into fat will be burned off, as long as you weren't way in excess. Like you weren't 500, 800 calories in excess of what your metabolic rate is. That fat will mostly be broken down through that little window from, say, 3 in the morning till 7 or 8 in the morning when you get up and you first eat. Again, it varies depending on your genetics and your dietary needs or your dietary habits. For someone that's only looking to lose 5, 10, 15 pounds or stay where they're at, that's perfectly fine. But for someone like me, I'm looking to lose 90 pounds. I'd like to get down to 200. 205 is realistic, maybe 210. But we're aiming for 200, so 90 pounds loss. That little 5-hour window, give or take, of production isn't enough. It's just not going to overcome everything else. So what we need to do is we need to get our body functioning off the carbohydrates, focusing on the ketone production. Remove the sugars, remove the carbohydrates to let the body stay in that ketogenic state for much longer. And that is what I'm now doing. So, as I go forward through this channel, hopefully more people will join, hopefully you find things that you like. What I want to do is going to document this process. At this point, as of recording this, I've been on the diet for basically exactly a week. And I already have some interesting things to share about that, which will come in the very next video. Right off the bat, I'm going to make probably 4 or 5 videos, just because I want to go a little more in depth in what I just discussed with the science. I want to talk a little bit about fasting, intermittent fasting, what it ties into, but we don't want this video to get too long. So there's going to be a big dump of videos in order to set everything up. I'm going to curate a playlist so everything sort of makes sense. That way you can start on this video and then you'll go right into the science, you'll go into all of this, and then into the results and the process you need to go through. Hopefully you guys find this useful, and yeah, I think that about sets us up with where we need to start off. So this is going to be, I'm Bob. I'm looking to create a healthy gamer lifestyle. This is going to be some gamer nutrition. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, and thanks for watching.